Hi, I'm Drew, and I'm an amateur model builder. I'm building a layout in my basement called the White River Line, inspired by the Frisco Railroad in the Ozarks. So I said at the end of my last video, I feel like I've been doing track work for months. And I went back and looked it up, and I've been doing track work since the middle of April. So I'm ready for a little bit of a break from the track work. So I've set up the modeling station here over at my workbench, and I'm going to get started on a kitbash project that I found here in this book called H.O. Lineside Industries You Can Build. It's a lumber yard and milling work. It's going to sit on the industrial section of my railroad. Now, I don't plan to get all of it done in this video, but I want to get a good start on it before I head back over to the layout and get started on even more track work. So let's jump on into it. I've read through this article several times already, but I decided to browse through it one more time before I got to work. There are racks of lumber on the first floor of this business, and a millwork shop on the second floor. There's also an office and a gantry crane. Tracks will lead into the yard and go between the two racks of lumber, where a boxcar can be spotted. As some of you might have recognized, this project is built from Atlas lumberyard kits. 3 of them. So I set about modifying these kits according to the instructions in the article. One of the kits is basically assembled as per the kit's instructions, with only minor modifications. First was to cut the base to remove the foundation of the small office that is part of the original kit. I debated about the best technique and tool to use here. I've got a rusty old Atlas super saw I inherited from a friend. So I scored the base using an X-Acto knife to start the cut. Then I used the saw. And finally, I snapped it off and cleaned up the cut. The other 2 kits will be assembled as one long set of lumber racks and require more extensive modification. I began in the same way here, modifying the bases. But I upgraded my saw from my local hobby store. In my eagerness to get going on this project, I mistakenly cut this first base in the wrong place. I need this little channel with the slots for the walls and framing, so I had to make an additional cut to fix my mistake. Next, I cut off the piece of the base with the foundation for the office. Then, I cut off the other side of this base. Finally, I cut off the office portion of the third and final piece. The edges of the bases don't line up, and I considered trimming them so that they would, but I'm going to cover it up on the layout anyway. I did a little more trimming and filing to get the bases to butt up as flush as possible. There's still a bit of a gap on one side, but again, it's going to get covered anyway. I cemented the bases together. Next, I began work on modifying the support posts. For the first kit, these didn't require any modification. For the other kits, I decided to make an adjustment from the article's instructions. The instructions call to flip the support posts around on the left as a mirror image. However, this would put the diagonal braces on the back side, as well as the wood grain molded into these pieces. It would also put the slots for the second floor platform on the back. I decided not to flip these pieces around. I cut off the beams at the outside posts. Later, I'll add a piece on the left to get the length that I need. Placing these pieces in the base, I then trimmed off a bit of the beam from the posts on the right side. I cemented them together. Next, I added the back walls. Again, no modifications are needed for the first kit. For the other kits, I completely removed the center section on one wall. On the other kit, I simply cut off the beveled corner. As I cemented these pieces together, I was a little nervous that there was very little contact between the two walls due to the bevel on the section on the left. I had the beveled piece I'd cut off the right side, so I made adjustments to it and used it to strengthen this joint. Now I moved on to the side walls. The millwork sit on top of these sheds for the lumber. It was a later pop-up addition to this business. I need to make some modifications to the side wall for Kit 1. Specifically, I need to cut out a little notch for the millwork addition to sit on. I made the same modifications to the left side wall for the doubled up kit. However, no modifications were needed for the right side wall. I'm going to need to bevel the left corner of the back wall to get this piece to fit, but I'm not sure how I want to do that, so I'll hold off for a while to think about it. This leaves me with two additional side walls. These I modified for the construction of the mill workshop. I cut these as simple gable ends. For the left wall, I did my best to shave off this little ledge and the molded in tools, but it doesn't look as good as I'd like. In the end, I'll probably just cover it up to disguise it. Next, I needed to add a door, so I pulled out my assortment of Tichy windows and doors and found the one I wanted. I carefully cut out for the door. The framing for this door is a separate piece in the pack I got from Tichy, and it's a little too lavish for a building like this, so I made my own from stripped styrene. After some rough dry fitting, I found I was going to need a notch on the right wall, so I cut that in. With these walls done, I went back to the back wall of the lumber shed to bevel that edge. I'd figured I'd just carve that bevel with my X-Acto knife and clean it up with a file. With a little more fiddling, I got it to fit pretty well. With this left wall in place, I was ready to add a bit onto the beam and get these pieces finished up. I'm waiting for some supplies to arrive, so I switched gears from the main building to the lumberyard office. The kit comes with a small office for the lumberyard, and the instructions call to combine several of these parts to build a larger structure. I'll be using the bits of the bases that have the office foundations that I'd cut off earlier. They will require some further modification. I did a little dry fitting and mental planning. I need to build a piece that will serve as the interior floor and the front and back porch for the office. So I needed to grab some styrene sheet. I have a pretty good sized piece of 020, but I want something that's a little thicker. I know I've got something somewhere. This piece isn't quite big enough. I eventually found a piece of 040 that should work. I'd rather use some 030, but I don't have any, and neither does my local hobby store. So this will do. After sizing it, I scribed some lines for boards. I struggled with this a bit. It's kind of difficult to get the spacing even and precise. I was unhappy with my work, so I flipped it over and started again. It isn't quite what I want, but it's good enough. I need to figure out a better technique for this. I cut into the ends a little bit too to make sure it looks like the boards actually go all the way through. I also roughed it up with some 100 grit sandpaper to simulate wood grain, and then I did my best to clean up all the burrs this process creates. I added some framing to the bottom of the floor, along with a couple of posts. Next, I need to cut off a little bit of the bottom of these entryway walls while leaving the corner trim. After a bit of dry fitting, I discovered I needed to further modify these bases. This is my first kitbash project, and I'm finding that it can require a bit of problem solving and improvisation. Now I'm going to work on the windows and doors for the office building. The doors are molded in an open position, and I think it'll look strange to have both of them open on the model, especially being open in the exact same angle. I decided to shut one of them. More dry fitting reveals that I need to modify these holes for the doors. The notches I cut in the bottom of the wall necessitate that the doors be moved up. Again, more improvisation. I added a few styrene strips to hold this door closed and to cover up the gaps between the door and the framing. I cemented the closed door in the wall. I'll skip the open door for now. I don't want to risk damaging it during painting, and it would make the wall wobbly and difficult to handle. I also cemented the long front and back walls together. I did a little more dry fitting before moving on. I'll hold off on manufacturing the roof. I want to have the walls completely constructed first, so I can be as precise as possible when building them. I gathered up some scratch building supplies in preparation for finishing up the millwork shop. I've been waiting for this shipment of goodies from Tichy Train Group to arrive. It's specifically these windows. The length of the millwork shop will match the length of the short shed, so I grabbed the back wall to use as my reference. 7 windows is a bit shorter than I'd like, but 8 windows is too wide. I added some scale 2x4s as spacer between the windows and glued them up. Next, I added 040 square strips along the bottom. Before moving on, I need to figure out the height of the walls. These side walls won't be as tall as the gable ends. The bottom of the shop sits below the roof line of the lumber sheds, and I have to account for the thickness of the roof too. At this point, I realized I probably should have waited to cut these gable ends until after I'd built the sidewalls. Now I need to add to the ends of the walls. I'll be using this 3/16 inch channel to lap around the gable ends to provide plenty of gluing surface. To make up the difference, I cut some 040 styrene sheet. I added another piece of 040 square styrene strip to the top. Next was the last bit of construction of the main part of this build, except for the roofs. The shop floor. I again used the parts I had already constructed to get the dimensions. Then I cut a piece of 020 styrene. I'd like to use something thicker, but it's what I've got. And it'll work well for a little experiment I have in mind. Rather than scribing the lines for the wood floor, I'm going to lay down individual planks made of 010 by 060 styrene strips. I cut them 12 scale feet long. I've never seen anyone do this before, and maybe there's a reason why. This could be a total nightmare. However, as I worked, I realized it's not too bad. Tedious and time-consuming, sure, but not difficult. This is the perfect place for this experiment. If it looks great, the large windows of the shop will make it pretty visible. If it looks terrible, I can hide it with some interior details. Once I got a piece in the right place, I tacked down one side and then glued the rest. The cement dries pretty quickly, but I can make small adjustments with my tweezers if needed, if I'm fast enough. Occasionally, I draw a line to make sure I'm keeping the strips straight. Other than taking a little bit longer than I anticipated, this is flowing pretty well. But I'm running out of time if I want to meet my deadline for this video. I still need to add some joists to the bottom of the flooring, but I'm going to leave you for now. My next steps here will be to distress the model, then I'll get on to base paint. Please look below for my links to Instagram and Facebook, as well as information about the tools, supplies, and resources I used. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave a like below. It's the easiest way you can support my channel. Of course, subscribing is even better, and always appreciated. If you'd like to support me a little further, check out my Amazon wish list. It's in the description below too. In my next video, I'm going to head back over to the layout to do some more track work. So please join me again next time as I continue modeling the White River Line.